All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, we've established this timeline now, is that on? Yes. We've established the timeline, and let's just start with Devellin. The first time that Devellin said anything to you about the rebuttal video was in the January 19, 2004, interview, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Now, when you had these interviews, this was a pretty big event in the investigation, was it not? The interviews of January 19.
A big event in what respect?
Big event in the respect that you, meaning you and Mr. Snedden and Mr. Zonin and perhaps other law enforcement officers, had seen the rebuttal video, and you were calling the family in to ask them how they could do that video.
Your Honor, I object. Assumes facts not in evidence.
Well, it was compound probably. Let me break it down. You had seen the video by January 19, correct?
That's correct.
And to your knowledge, had Mr. Snedden seen the video by January 19?
I don't recall that.
Before he commenced or before you all commenced the interviews with the kids on January 19, Mr. Snedden saw the video, correct?
I can't answer that. I'm not sure of that. I know that a portion of that video I did see, because one of my investigators showed it to me on the computer.
All right.
I can't answer for Mr. Snedden. I believe that was the first time I saw it. I'm not positive, though.
Okay, my question may not have been clear. What I was talking about is, at the very least, he showed the video before you started doing the interview with the kids, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And when you showed the video to the kids, Mr. Snedden watched it, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Zonin watched it, correct?
Correct.
You watched it.
Correct.
And were there any other people there? Was Detective Zelis there?
Detective Zelis.
He watched it.
That's correct. And I think Lieutenant Klapakis watched it.
All right. Now, the reason for the meeting, as it were, was to ask this family how they could do a rebuttal video like that if they maintained these allegations. Is that correct?
I'm going to object to that question as argumentative. It's just, that's like testifying.
Overruled.
Do you have the question in mind?
Why don't you repeat your question?
I'll have the court reporter do it. Record read.
That is incorrect. It was to clarify regarding my previous interview with them, to clarify issues that they were saying on the tape.
All right. As of the previous interviews, none of the Arvizo children had been asked about the rebuttal video, correct?
That is correct.
And none of them had been asked about the Miller interview, is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
In fact, due to whatever factors, you were not able to actually listen to the Miller video until sometime in February, I believe, of 2004, is that correct?
I think counsel misspoke about a video.
What did I say? I said, listen to a video. I meant listen to an audio tape, you're correct. May I rephrase?
Rephrase. Yes.
Towards the end of the day. I didn't have pizza, but maybe because I didn't, I'm fading here. Okay, let's try that again. The Miller tape, which now we've found is an audio tape, is that correct?
That is correct.
And that audio tape apparently was made about March the 16th, I believe, is that correct, of 2003?
That sounds about right.
So that tape was not found at all by law enforcement before November 18th, correct?
That's correct.
And in other words, when I say, found, nobody gave you a copy. You didn't have a copy of it, correct?
Correct.
And nobody told you about it before November 18th, did they?
Yeah, meaning nobody told me about the interview or about the tape.
That there was a tape-recorded interview with Brad Miller.
I cannot say for sure because I haven't gone over my report, my interview with Mrs. Arvizo. But I believe she mentioned something in her interview regarding that.
Your belief right now is you're sitting there.
I believe so. I'm not positive, but I believe it was mentioned during that interview.
We'll come back to that. As far as the kids are concerned, the kids never mentioned anything about being tape recorded.
I don't believe they did.
And they were never asked anything about being tape recorded, were they?
That is correct.
Does that help refresh your recollection that you didn't know about it?
Right. We didn't know, right?
Now, that tape, That audio tape of Brad Miller doing the interview with the Arvizo family was seized on November 18 from Brad Miller's office, correct?
Correct.
Due to reasons beyond your control, you were not able to actually listen to that tape until sometime in February of 2004. Is that correct?
I'm not sure of the date, but it was right around that. It was 2004, somewhere in there.
And it was after the January 19 interview.
I believe it was.
Alright, so when you interviewed Devellin on January 19, 2004, you asked her why she said, father, and why they were talking about father, and father figure, and all that. Is that correct?
Okay, you're getting into the interview portion of it, and to the best of my recollection, I don't recall me being the one that interviewed her regarding that video. That would have been Detective Zelis.
You were in and out of the room.
Yes, I was.
Okay, when you were in the room, you don't recall ever talking about diet or telling her she had to say that sort of thing.
Like I said, I'd have to go on ahead and, if you have the transcripts to that, to let me recall my memory, that would be great.
I do have the transcripts.
I cannot remember what portions that I was in, and a majority of those I was not in.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
The transcript of that particular interview is a few pages. I've given you the whole notebook.
This has the DA and then it has her. It doesn't have us.
I'm sorry. What I did, I was going to explain. I gave it to you open to the page that I had it open to.
Right.
If you go back, you'll see where it starts there. And you're welcome to look at the whole thing. Either you were there or you weren't. If you weren't there, that's okay. You can just tell me, and we'll.
I don't recall being sitting in on this particular interview, is what I'm saying. And even with the boys and so forth, because I was out doing other things. I watched the video that day. I did watch that.
I'll come get it in a second. You've reviewed the transcript that I've showed you, of Devellin's interview of January the 19th, 2004, and it doesn't refresh your recollection as to anything that might have been said in your presence.
It doesn't.
Okay, alright, may I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. As the lead investigator in this case, did you become aware after the January 19th interviews that essentially the three children had an explanation for how they could give that interview that was shown on the rebuttal and still maintain their allegations?
That is correct.
And, in essence, they were claiming that Dieter told them to say much of what was said on that tape.
Correct.
Alright, well, while we're on Devellin, and then we'll go back to the others and see how far we get with them. And, Your Honor, if you wanted to hit the lights.
Okay.
That would be fine. With regard to Devellin, you first interviewed her on July 7, 2003. We talked about that, right?
Correct.
And that was the interview where she gave you a tremendous amount of detail about what happened to her brothers, allegedly, right?
Detail, meaning, regarding what?
Well, we could go through it.
I have transcripts of her interview up here.
Alright, Devellin told you some things that she claimed to have observed herself, correct?
Correct.
And none of those things involved allegations of child molest, is that correct?
Right.
That she observed herself.
I believe you're correct, yes.
However, she gave you details as to what allegedly happened to Gavin and allegedly what Starr claimed to have seen, is that right?
I recall her giving me details regarding drinking alcohol, things to that effect, but not regarding the actual act of molestation, no.
She told you, well, let's do it this way. Your Honor, the bailiff indicated I was supposed to alert if we were going to get into sexually explicit.
No, just the photographs.
Just photographs. Okay. She told you, and I'm talking about July 7, 2003. She told you that.
Your Honor, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me start again. I'm talking about the July 7, 2003, interview. She told you that Gavin and Starr told her that Michael Jackson talked to them about masturbation. Is that correct?
Okay, that does, yes.
And she told you that the conversation involved the question of whether or not white stuff came out. Is that correct?
Correct.
She told you that Gavin and Starr talked about other particular claims like the mannequin incident, right?
Correct.
And there are a number of others, is that right? A number of other details.
Correct.
Alright, and she told you that the way she learned those details is that Gavin would tell her and Star would stand there and listen and agree with what Gavin was saying.
I don't recall that.
Okay, I'll come back to that in 1 second. She also told you that her mother had told her certain things about this, is that correct?
I don't know what certain things you're talking about, Mr. Sanger.
Well, for instance, that the mother had told her the story about the urine bottle.
Okay, yes.
Is that right? Now, on the other one there, I'm going to refer you to page 24.
Okay, I'm there.
Would it refresh your recollection as to what you were told at that time?
Do you mean the whole page, is what you're asking, or?
I'm sorry. If you start at about line 13, or line 11.
Yes, it does.
And, in fact, Devellin told you that Gavin and Star told her the stories, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that she said, yeah, it's like one tells me and the other one agrees to it. Is that a quote as to what she said to you at that time?
It's in the transcripts. I don't recall her saying that, but it's there, so it must be correct.
Well, I don't want you to agree with something reluctantly.
I mean, I don't recall her saying that.
Would it help you to listen to the tape to refresh your recollection?
That probably would.
Alright, would you be able to do that at the break this evening and come back tomorrow? I don't want to do it here in court, if we can avoid it.
Sure.
Okay, you have a copy of the tape you can listen to.
I think I can get a copy of that, sure.
Alright, do you recall her saying, let me withdraw that? Do you recall Detective Zelis asking her, so are they together? I'm sorry. Let me try it again. So are they together when they tell you this? And Devellin saying, yeah, most of the time. Detective Zelis. Most of the time. Okay, do you recall that, or do you need to listen to the tape to refresh?
Well, the interview was quite a while ago, so, I need to listen to that as well.
This was a transcript that was actually prepared by a certified court reporter.
Uh-huh.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And it was prepared at the request of the Sheriff's Department, or the DA, is that correct?
Correct.
Alright, so you don't have any reason to believe that the transcript is inaccurate. You just want to be careful and...
Correct. That is correct.
Alright, now, do you recall Devellin telling you during this interview of July the 7th, that Gavin was a loving little boy, and that he started acting out after these events?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall the next interview on August 13, 2003, where she said Gavin was becoming violent and argumentative as a result of these events?
That is correct.
Alright, now, there was an interview. Let me just be sure I've got the right one here. Excuse me, did you interview Devellin on November the 25th?
No, I believe, to the best of my recollection, it was only the boys.
Only the boys. Okay, at some point, did Devellin tell you in one of the interviews that she was always by herself at the ranch and she was not allowed to be with her mom?
I'd have to review that.
Alright, I'll ask you if you could do that. And I'll find you the page number for that.
Okay.
Before we leave today, alright, let's take a look at Gavin Arvizo's. Now, Gavin Arvizo, on August 13, 2003. Let me withdraw that, before we get to this. This pertains to the story or the claims about masturbation. You were sitting here when Gavin Arvizo testified on the stand during this trial, correct?
Correct.
And he said that Michael Jackson told him, if men don't masturbate, they get to a level where they might rape a girl. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay, that was the first time you ever heard Gavin Arvizo attribute that statement to Michael Jackson, was it not, sir?
I believe so.
And, in fact, Gavin Arvizo told you on August 13, 2003, that it was his grandmother who told him, if men don't do it, men might get to a point where they might go ahead and rape a woman. Is that correct? Page 28, if you want to take a look at it.
I'd like to do that.
August 13th.
Is that 28 you said?
Yes. 28, line 4, starts, my grandma explained it to me.
Yes.
And you remember him saying that because, in fact, you testified before the grand jury on April 14 of 2004, that Gavin, in fact, told you that his grandmother said that. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
And, in fact, in the August 13, 2003, interview, Gavin said, "My grandma explained it to me. She told me that you're the only reason. Because like if men don't do it, men might get to a point where they might go ahead and rape a woman. So instead of having to do that, so they don't get wanting to go do that." Did he say that?
Yes.
Alright, now, do you have a recollection of Gavin's interview of January 19th of 2004?
That's going to fall under the same category as Devellin.
Okay, as far as you know, though, from your investigation, that was the first time. The January 19th, 2004 interview was the first time that the kids were confronted with the rebuttal video and asked to explain why they said what they said.
That's correct.
Did you become aware that Gavin Arvizo in that January 19, 2004 interview said that 99.9% of the things on the rebuttal tape were not true?
I don't recall that, but I'd have to review that as well.
And were you in general, and I'll get off it here, were you, in general, aware that he had said that Dieter told them to say what they said?
Your Honor, I should have objected earlier. I object to the fact that this officer is not established as even in the room when those statements were made. Lack of foundation.
Well, I'll sustain the objection. More importantly, the question, in general, calls for a conclusion on his part.
Alright. Well, I'll just ask you to review that tape as well, or the transcript again, to see if it refreshes your recollection if you were there. If you were, that's fine. And if you weren't, that's okay, too. Were there inconsistencies? Besides the one we just talked about, were there inconsistencies?
I'm going to object to that kind of talk from counsel. It's a conclusion on his part.
That kind of talk. I object to the objection as not being proper. Let me withdraw it, Your Honor.
There's no question there, so go ahead and do a question.
You talked about the inconsistency between the statement about masturbation on the stand versus prior statements. And other than that, were there other inconsistencies in Gavin Arvizo's statements that he gave over the period of time?
Can you direct me to what?
Did you notice that there were any?
Both times regarding
Anything. Other inconsistencies. You can say, yes, or, no.
I don't believe so.
Alright, on July 7, 2003, Gavin said that he called Michael Jackson at the Universal Hilton, correct?
That's correct.
And in August, he said Michael Jackson called him to invite him over, is that right? Page 18 of the August 13th interview.
Yes, down here, that he thinks he called me. It's not a definite, but he says, I think he called me. I see that.
It goes on, does it not? He says, on page 18, when he's asked why did he meet with Michael at the Hilton, he says, I just wanted, because he wanted me to come. He says, did he call you or did you call him? He says, I think he called me. And then we were talking, and he told me that he was at the Hilton, at the Universal Hilton, and we started talking about me visiting, so I just came to visit.
I see that.
Now.
Excuse me, counsel, will you read the rest of the statement?
I can read whatever you want. Let me see here.
Well, the last 4 lines of the statement, I think.
Well, then there's a question. Or do you want the next? I don't have to do this, but I will. Alright, there's a question. Did he say, hey, why don't you come over and visit? Is that what he asked? Answer. I don't remember how it happened. But I remember I came over. Okay, the point of this is that Gavin's current statements in court and his statement on the 7th of July, 2003, were to the effect that he had found out that Michael was at the Hilton and he called him, and Michael Jackson picked up, and that's how he got a hold of him. Isn't that right?
According to his statement, that's a correct statement.
Alright, now, let's talk about something a little more substantive here. On July 7, 2003, Gavin said that he was masturbated by Michael Jackson 5 times or so, did he not?
Yes, he did.
And then on August 13, 2003, he said he was masturbated 5 times and he ejaculated all 5 times, right?
Correct.
Now, we'll hold on to that. And let's go to another issue. As far as the timing of the incidents was concerned, you already answered some questions on direct on this. I keep doing that. On July 7, 2003, Gavin Arvizo said that the masturbation incidents occurred on one of the last days that I was staying at Neverland. Correct.
I recall it as being towards his last days of staying at Neverland.
Okay.
So it was towards before he left for good, yes. That's the way I understand it.
Alright, if you look at page 30, the question is, he said one of the last days, like towards the last days I was staying at Neverland, is that a fair statement?
You're talking about August, correct? The August interview.
No, this is July.
Oh.
The first interview, July 7, 2003. Page 30.
I have it.
Lines 20 and 21.
I just read it.
Mr. Snedden just indicated somebody was confused. I don't know who he was referring to here, so we're okay. He said, in fact, one of the last days, like towards the last days when I was staying at Neverland, is that correct?
That is correct.
Your investigation eventually disclosed that during the last days they stayed at Neverland, there wouldn't have been 5 occasions when molest could have occurred. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that?
No.
Would you like that read back? Yes. Record read. No, that's not correct.
Alright, now, in the August interview, Gavin told you, on pages 38 to 41.
Okay, I'm there.
He starts out talking about the DCFS interview, correct? And.
Just a second, what line are you?
Well, hang on 1 second. I'm not asking for a quote here. I'm just trying to put it in context. On page 38, they're talking about the DCFS interview. Put it in context. You're welcome to read the whole thing, too. Whatever you want so you feel comfortable with it.
Okay.
And if you read that whole segment, it appears that he is saying that the molest started before the DCFS interview.
That's not the way I understand that.
Well, because he is saying, is he not, that the purpose of the interview is to, let me withdraw it. Let's put it this way. That's not your impression.
That's not my impression.
Okay, alright, let's come back to that. Now, if you go to the November 25, 03 interview, look at page 2 and 3, he says that the acts that Michael Jackson engaged in, occurred both before and after the DCFS interview, right?
Well, he initially states that they occurred after the DCFS interview. And then he thought further, and he said some of the acts, that he believes they occurred before and after.
Right. And the investigator asked, it was both. Are you pretty sure? Answer. Yeah.
Okay.
And then it goes on, because I think you said it happened about 5 times, and what you're saying is that you're thinking it happened before and after that. Answer. Yeah, both times. Yeah, okay, that's all I need to know. Right.
Right.
And that pretty much ended the interview. The investigator. Was that you asking those questions?
That was me, yes.
Okay, that was what you were trying to discern in this tape-recorded interview, correct?
Correct.
Now, on January 19, 04 again, you don't remember the exact interview. And you're going to review that and see if you recall more of it later. But did you become aware, as the lead investigator in this case, that Gavin Arvizo then told you he wasn't sure when these events occurred, and that you guys would probably know the dates?
I would have to read. Was that said during that interview?
Yes.
Okay, I don't recall that. I'd have to review that as well.
Were you advised that was now an issue?
No.
Okay, and you're aware of his grand jury testimony, is that correct?
Portions of it, yes.
And in the grand jury he went back to saying it was after the Calabasas trip from March 2 through March 12, is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
And you determined, did you not, that Michael Jackson was not at the ranch during that entire period of time, did you not?
Which period of time are you talking?
From March 2 through March 12.
Yes. Wait, I'm sorry. That he was not there or that he was there?
Was he there the entire time, every day? Did you determine whether he was or he wasn't?
Not, from March 2 through the 12th.
Yes.
There were a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, that he was not there.
Alright, there were 2, 3 days that you were able to establish he was somewhere else.
Showing that he was off the ranch.
Right. Now, let's take Starr, again. Starr did not mention the rebuttal video or the interview by Bradley Miller before the search, is that correct?
I don't believe he did. That is correct.
Starr was more detailed in his description of things than Gavin was, is that correct?
There were two different acts. He saw things going on and Gavin was actually having it happen to him. So, I thought that they both described them very clearly.
Okay, well, there were conflicts in what they described. For instance, Gavin described his brother as wearing boxers, whereas his brother described that he was wearing pajamas, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. It's vague in terms of what incidents he's talking about.
Sustained.
All right. Well, when you interviewed Starr, he had already been interviewed by Stan Katz, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you said, in essence, what Stan Katz had said all of the kids had said to him, is that right?
Correct.
When Starr described, on July 7th, Starr described walking up the stairs and he described his brother having pajamas on, is that correct?
I believe you're right.
But then he said that he saw that Mr. Jackson had his hand in Gavin's underwear, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you were aware that he had told Stan Katz that the incident occurred while Gavin was wearing boxers.
Your Honor, I'm going to object again with regard to the fact that there are two incidents described by this witness.
And I object to a speaking objection, because
Sustained. Both of you.
it's a fair trade-off. Okay. In Mr. Katz, or Dr. Katz's interview, there was reference to a first incident and a second incident, correct?
I don't believe I have Dr. Katz interview with me here.
I'm going to object. I object.
We'll go back to it. We'll just stick with what you have. So on the first incident on July 7th, there's discussion of sleeping. Gavin sleeping in pajamas, but then Michael Jackson reaching into Gavin's underwear, right?
Correct.
On August 13th, Starr says Michael Jackson put his hand into Gavin's boxers, is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
And on November 25, 2003, Gavin said, Starr said that Gavin was wearing underwear, specifically because Michael Jackson told him to sleep in his underwear, right?
I'm looking over it. You're talking about the interview on the 25th, correct?
On November the 25th.
With Starr.
Yes.
Okay.
And he said that, is that right?
Correct.
And then he said that Michael Jackson had his hand in Gavin's underwear, correct?
Correct.
And he also said that this incident occurred 5 days or a week after February 20th, is that right?
Are we on the same interview?
Yes.
That is correct.
And that no incident of masturbation occurred before this. Before this one that he just described as being 5 days to a week after February 20th.
Right.
Okay, now, in the Stan Katz interview with Paul Zelis, what Paul Zelis told you about his interview with Stan Katz, there was no mention of a second incident of masturbation.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. It's double, triple hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. And on July 7th, Starr told you that there was a second incident of masturbation, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, on the 13th, it wasn't clear from the interview as to what incident he was talking about, it wasn't clearly delineated between two incidents, is that right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that, too. That's a statement of counsel testifying.
I'm asking the witness who conducted the interview.
If it was.
Just a moment. I'll overrule the objection. Do you want the question read back?
Yes, sir. Record read. To the best of my knowledge, during that interview, he was, as I understood it, he was very clear on both incidences that he saw.
Well, he said that Gavin was wearing boxers during an incident which may or may not be the first or the second incident or both.
Okay, so
I'm asking you, did he say he was wearing boxers? Did he tell you Gavin was wearing anything other than boxers when he described the incidents on August 13th?
I believe he said pajamas.
Okay, the second incident he said pajamas.
I'm going to look at that.
All right.
What page are you on? That's July 7th.
No, this is August 13th.
What page are you on?
I'm trying to find it for you here. Your recollection. What we're looking for. Your recollection is that he talked about wearing pajamas on August 13th for the second incident.
Well, I need to look at it.
Okay, I'm looking at page 17.
Okay.
It says, boxers, right?
Yes, down at the bottom, it does. His brother's boxers. Are you talking about line 23?
Right. So once again, with Star, you'd have to review the January 19th tape and/or transcript to tell me whether or not you recall what he said specifically about the video.
That is correct.
But you do know from your investigation that essentially he said Dieter made them memorize lines and say things like, father, and, humble, and so on. Is that correct?
To the best of my recollection, yes.
Okay, just as a follow-up on something here. I had asked you about Mr. Snedden going down to Los Angeles and interviewing Janet Arvizo, I believe. Okay. Your answer was you don't recall that happening or you don't recall when it happened.
No, I did recall him going down there. And I don't recall the date that occurred. And it wasn't for an interview. It was for forms to be signed.
Alright, it was sometime before the 18th. Okay, now, I think you told us you've been a sheriff for a long time, 20-some years, right?
Yes, approximately 22.
And you were not personally, or were you personally involved in investigating Mr. Jackson anytime prior to the time that you commenced your investigation in, whenever you told us, June 20th or so?
No, that was the first time.
Alright, so June 20th, you had information that had been obtained from Dr. Katz, and July 7th, you proceed to interview the kids, right?
That is correct.
And on that date, you indicated that, we're going to try our best to make this case work, is that correct?
Let me refer to that.
You can look at, it's in Devellin's interview, page 33.
Okay, I'm on page 33. There was quite a bit more where that, in addition to what I said in regards to that.
Well, we can read the whole thing.
Okay, I already read the whole thing.
Alright, so you said to Devellin towards the end of her interview, okay, one thing I wanted to say and emphasize to you is that you guys are doing the right thing here. You know what? I know it's scary, and I really realize that you guys are going through a lot and you've been through a lot as a family. They're the ones that have done wrong, not you. And trust me in this, and trust Detective Zelis, we're law enforcement. We're going to try our best to make this case work. I can't guarantee it, where it's going to go from here, but that's why we're interviewing everybody involved. I don't care how much money they have, do you want me to keep going? Who he is, but he's done wrong. You guys are the victims. Your family is. He is wrong in what he's done. We're going to try our best. Can't guarantee it. We're going to try our best to bring him to justice. Did you say that?
I definitely said that.
Okay, so that's not the statement of somebody who has an open mind who's looking to see whether or not these people are telling the truth, is it?
That statement, Mr. Sanger, is what, through my courses that I've had, and you have victims that are terrified in coming forward to law enforcement. That is to reassure them that they are not the suspects or they are the victims in the case. And I was reassuring them through that and letting them know that they are doing the right thing, because they were terrified when they came forward. And it took us about 2 weeks to get them to come forward and up here to be interviewed.
Okay, now, when you say that the technique that you're taught is to reassure people that if they're telling the truth and coming forward and being honest that they have nothing to fear, right? It's not to tell them that they're right and somebody else is wrong and you're going to get them. That's your version of the speech, isn't it?
My version of the speech is what I just explained.
It is.
And they were concerned about coming forward to law enforcement, and they were concerned about whether they were going to make the case or not. And I told them we would try our best.
And from the beginning, you have made a concerted effort to make this case work, have you not?
Yep, I did.
Alright, now, we have 3 minutes. But Detective Robel does need to look at the materials. And I could ask 3 minutes of silly questions, but I'll spare you that, Your Honor. I don't have another question for him until he does that.
You're threatening me with silly questions.
Yes.
All right, I don't think you're bluffing, so we'll call it laughter.